The Exilari Empire had conquered thousands of worlds. Every species they found had two choices: kneel or die. For centuries, none had dared resist. Until now. The Empire's fleets arrived at the edge of human space, their massive warships blotting out the stars. The Exilari commander, Lord Virex, stood tall in his throne room, surrounded by his generals. His insect-like mandibles clicked in amusement as he watched the holographic image of the last human colonies. "These creatures are weak," one of his officers sneered. Virex nodded. Every species was the same. At first, they fought. Then they begged. And in the end, they kneeled. He sent a message to the humans. Kneel before the Empire, or be destroyed. For a while, there was silence. Then the response arrived. A simple text message. "Come and take us." Virex laughed. The humans had spirit, but spirit would not save them. He turned to his fleet commanders. "Burn their worlds." The Exilari warships moved forward, preparing to annihilate the human colonies. They expected resistance, desperate fighters, maybe a few primitive defenses. But as they entered human space, they found something strange. The planets were lifeless. Cities stood empty. Space stations floated like ghost ships. There were no civilians, no armies, just silence. It was as if humanity had vanished. A Exilari officer hesitated. "Where are they?" Virex frowned. He had seen worlds surrender. He had seen worlds fight. But he had never seen worlds abandoned. Then, the first warship exploded. A human fleet emerged from the darkness, silent, invisible, and waiting. They had hidden in deep space, engines cold, weapons primed. Now, they struck with a fury no empire had ever seen. Exilari ships shattered under brutal railgun fire. Torpedoes ripped through their ranks. They had walked into a trap, and now there was no escape. The Exilari, once the unstoppable conquerors, were hunted. Virex's eyes widened in shock. This is impossible. But he was wrong. This was just the beginning. Lord Virex watched in horror as his fleet burned. The humans did not fight like a weak, dying species. They fought like ghosts, silent, deadly, and merciless. Their ships moved with precision, striking and vanishing before the Exilari could react. The Empire's warships, built for open battles, were useless in this chaotic ambush. Virex slammed his fist against the control panel. How? How are they doing this? No one had an answer. The Exilari Empire believed humanity was just another primitive race. Their intelligence reports showed humans had lost their homeworld, Earth. Long ago, the Empire assumed it was destroyed in a war. A tragic story, but nothing special. They were wrong. Humans did not lose Earth to invaders. They burned it themselves. Long ago, when an alien species tried to conquer Earth, humanity made a terrible decision. Instead of surrendering, they destroyed their own planet to deny the enemy victory. They turned their home into fire and ash, leaving nothing behind. The survivors became wanderers, living in deep space, building hidden colonies, and preparing for the next war. They had no world to protect, no home to defend. And that made them the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy. The battle in space was over. The human fleet had disappeared into the void, leaving wreckage and corpses behind. Virex sat in his damaged flagship, shaken. The mighty Exilari fleet had been defeated, not by a vast army, not by powerful weapons, but by strategy, speed, and sheer ruthlessness. A message appeared on his screen. "You came to burn our worlds, but we have no worlds left to burn." Virex felt a chill. He had made a mistake, a terrible mistake. The humans were not just another weak race waiting to be conquered. They were monsters born from the ashes of their own home. And now, they were coming for the Empire. The Exilari Empire was in shock. Lord Virex's fleet had been wiped out in human space, something that had never happened before. The Emperor himself was furious. They are just one species, he roared in the imperial throne room. How can they stand against us? His war council stood in silence. No one had an answer. The emperor turned to his generals. Send more fleets. Crush them. Within days, 100 Scifi warships set out for human space. This time, they would not ask for surrender. They would annihilate humanity. But when the Scifi fleets arrived, they found nothing. No planets, no stations, no ships. It was as if humanity had vanished. This is a trap, one Scifi admiral muttered. But they had no choice. They had to find the humans. The warships split up, searching asteroid fields, dead moons, and deep space. Days passed. Nothing. Then the first fleet went silent. No distress calls, no wreckage, no survivors. Gone. Then the second fleet vanished. Then the third. Panic spread. The Scifi were the hunters, but now they were being hunted. In the darkness of space, the ghost fleets moved. Human warships were not like Scifi ships. They were smaller, faster, built for stealth. Their hulls were black, absorbing light. Their engines ran cold, making them invisible to sensors. They struck from the shadows, silent and precise. One Scifi warship at a time, they cut the Empire apart. Railguns punched through thick armor. Torpedoes shattered battleships. Human soldiers boarded enemy cruisers, wiping out the crews in brutal, close combat. The Scifi never saw them coming. A terrified Scifi officer sent a desperate message to the capital. They are not fighting for land. They are not fighting for power. They are fighting to erase us. The emperor finally understood. This was not a war. This was revenge. And the humans would not stop until the empire was dust. The Scifi fleets were dying in the dark. No battles, no declarations of war, just silence, then death. Entire warships disappeared. Admirals sent distress signals, but no help arrived. The mighty Scifi Empire, feared across the stars, was powerless against an enemy they could not see. The ghost fleets hunted them like predators, striking and vanishing before the Scifi could even react. On the bridge of his warship, Grand Admiral Vorkath clenched his claws. He was one of the Empire's greatest warriors, yet here he stood, blind and helpless. We need to fight them, one of his officers said. Vorkath bared his fangs. Fight what? He pointed to the empty void beyond the viewport. They are shadows. They do not fight like an empire. They fight like. A railgun round punched through the ship's hull, ripping through the command deck. The bridge exploded. Another Scifi warship had fallen. Across the sector, the slaughter continued. Humans did not fight like a traditional army. They did not engage in large battles. They did not try to take planets. They only had one goal: destroy everything that Scifi had built. They hacked supply lines, shut down communication networks, and poisoned fuel reserves. Scifi soldiers starved on their own bases. Their cities fell into chaos as power grids failed. The Empire's own people began to fear the dark. On the Scifi homeworld, the Emperor watched the reports with growing horror. My fleets, my armies, my empire, all crumbling. He could not understand it. No species had ever resisted the Scifi like this. Most surrendered. The few that fought lost quickly. But humans were different. They had no home to protect, no world to retreat to. They had burned their own planet rather than kneel. And now, they were turning that same fire against the Scifi. The Emperor's claws trembled. How do you stop an enemy that does not fear death? No one had an answer. Deep in space, a single Scifi cruiser drifted, its engines disabled. Its crew, terrified, clutched their weapons, waiting. Then they heard it. A soft tapping. Metallic boots against the hull. The humans had boarded the ship. Panic erupted. Scifi soldiers fired blindly into the darkness of the corridors, but they saw nothing. One by one, their lights flickered out. Then screams. The last survivor managed to send a final message. They are inside. They do not speak. They do not show mercy. We err. Silence. The message reached the Xilari capital. The emperor read it. His hands shook. For the first time in history, the Xilari Empire felt fear. The Xilari Empire had never known defeat. Until now. Their fleets were burning, their armies were scattered, and their leaders were terrified. The humans did not fight like an empire. They fought like ghosts, striking from the darkness and vanishing before the Xilari could react. The emperor could no longer ignore the truth. We are losing. But the Xilari were not ready to fall. If the humans wanted war, the empire would give them total destruction. The Xilari launched the largest invasion in their history. Thousands of warships, billions of soldiers. Their goal was simple: find every last human and erase them. World-burning weapons were activated. They would not just conquer, they would exterminate. The emperor spoke to his people. No more hiding. No more shadows. We will burn every last human colony. We will turn their bones to dust. The Xilari cheered. The empire was striking back. Victory was near. Or so they thought. The invasion fleets arrived in human space. But there were no planets to burn. No cities to destroy. Just empty stations, abandoned outposts, and cold, lifeless worlds. It was as if humanity had vanished again. Confusion spread through the Xilari ranks. Where were the humans? Then they found the message. A single transmission sent to every Xilari ship. You will never find us all. A chill ran through the Xilari commanders. Then the ghost fleets attacked. Stealth ships emerged from the void, weapons primed. Human warships, running cold, fired from impossible angles. Xilari dreadnoughts, built for open combat, were torn apart before they could fight back. Planets that should have been human colonies exploded from within, revealing hidden bombs left behind. Even the Xilari's own war factories were sabotage, their production lines collapsing into flames. The humans had planned for this. They had never intended to fight a normal war. This was annihilation. In the imperial palace, the emperor stared at the battle reports. This was not a war of conquest. This was a war of revenge. And the humans were winning. For the first time in his life, the emperor felt something he had never known before. Doubt. His empire had always been the hunter, the conqueror. Now, they were the prey. And there was nowhere left to hide. The Xilari Empire was collapsing. Their fleets were shattered, their armies were dying, and their colonies were burning. The humans had turned the war into a nightmare, striking from the shadows, destroying everything that Xilari had built. But warships and soldiers were not the only weapons humanity had. They had something far deadlier. Infiltrators. The emperor had ordered every human hunted down, but no one could find them. That was because the humans were already inside the empire. For months, human operatives had slipped into Xilari territory, disguised as slaves, traders, and mercenaries. They hacked supply lines, poisoned fuel reserves, and collapsed communication networks. Entire Xilari fleets were left stranded, their ships powerless. Their soldiers starved as food shipments vanished. The Empire's war factories were sabotage, leaving their armies with broken weapons. And worst of all, the slaves rebelled. For centuries, the Xilari had ruled through fear. They had crushed every species they conquered, forcing them to kneel. But the humans whispered a new idea to the oppressed worlds. The Empire is weak. Rise up. And they did. From the lowest slave pits to the highest noble houses, rebellion exploded across the Empire. Entire planets turned against their Xilari masters. Armories were raided. Xilari overlords were dragged into the streets. The Empire's armies, already weakened by human attacks, now had to fight their own people. On the Xilari homeworld, the Emperor watched in horror as his empire crumbled. His greatest warlords were dead. His fleets were crippled. His armies were deserting, and now even his palace was not safe. In the dark halls of the imperial palace, shadows moved. A human operative, clad in a stealth suit, crept past the royal guards. He had no army, no warship, only a single plasma blade. He entered the emperor's chamber and stood behind the Xilari ruler's throne. The emperor turned, his eyes widening in fear. For the first time in history, a Xilari emperor looked up at an enemy inside his own palace. The human raised his blade. The emperor whispered the last words of a dying empire. "Kneel." The human only smiled. Then he struck. The emperor of the Xilari Empire was dead. His lifeless body lay on the grand throne, his golden robes stained with his own blood. The assassin had disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind only a single message carved into the throne's armrest. "We do not kneel." The news spread like wildfire. The empire's people, once ruled by fear, now saw weakness. Their invincible leader had been slain in his own palace, and his armies were too broken to stop what came next. The empire was crumbling. Xilari warlords turned against each other, each trying to claim the throne. Generals fought among themselves, accusing one another of failure. The rebellion spread faster. Planets that once feared the Xilari rose up, throwing off their chains. The empire's control was shattered. Even loyal Xilari soldiers saw the truth. The war was lost. The humans had not only won the battles, they had broken the empire from within. In deep space, aboard a hidden warship, Admiral Kale of the human ghost fleets watched the chaos unfold. The humans had spent years planning this. They had studied the Xilari, learning their weaknesses. Now, the plan was complete. "Is it over?" a young officer asked. Kale looked at the screens, showing burning Xilari cities and rebelling planets. "No," he said, "not yet." The Xilari still had fleets, still had armies, but without leadership, without order, they were just pieces of a dying beast. And humans did not leave their enemies alive. The final phase had begun, the extermination. Across the empire, human warships descended like vultures. No mercy, no surrender. The Xilari had once given humanity a choice: kneel or die. Now, the Xilari faced the same choice, and the humans had no interest in letting them kneel. The empire had burned countless worlds. Now, their own worlds burned. And this time, there would be no survivors. The Xilari Empire was dying. Their fleets were scattered. Their armies were leaderless. Their people were afraid. And the humans were not done yet. The final phase of humanity's war had begun. Total extermination. Human warships swept through Xilari space, burning every stronghold, destroying every fleet, erasing every trace of the empire. There were no peace talks, no surrender. Humanity had not forgotten what the Xilari had done. They had not forgotten the billions who died when the empire first attacked. They had not forgotten the worlds that burned. And now, they would return the favor. On the Xilari colony world of Fokran 7, the last defenders stood trembling. They had sent a message to the empire, begging for reinforcements. But no help was coming. The empire was already dead. Then the sky turned black. Human warships descended, their weapons glowing red. The ground trembled as orbital bombardments began. Cities crumbled. Palaces burned. The Xilari had always been the conquerors, the rulers, the ones who gave orders. Now, they were nothing more than prey. Grand Admiral Kale watched from the command deck of his flagship. His eyes were cold. "Begin the purge," he ordered. Across the sector, human fleets received the same command. No survivors, no prisoners. The Xilari had shown no mercy when they attacked Earth, and now humanity would show none in return. On the last Xilari fortress world, a desperate general sent a final message into the void. "To any who can hear this, our empire is gone. The humans are coming. There is nowhere left to run." A voice responded, cold, unforgiving. We know. Then, the fortress world erupted into fire. The Exilary Empire was no more. The Exilary Empire was gone. Its fleets destroyed. Its cities burned. Its rulers dead. But a few Exilari had survived. They were the last of their kind, hiding in dark corners of the galaxy, running from the ghosts that hunted them. The ghosts of humanity. A small Exilari refugee fleet drifted in deep space, carrying the last survivors. They had no weapons, no army, and no hope. They had once ruled the stars. Now, they were beggars in the void. On the bridge of the lead ship, Supreme Commander Vorketh clenched his claws. "We must rebuild," he said. "We will return." But the crew did not answer. They all knew the truth. There would be no return. The humans had made sure of that. Then the alarms screamed. Something was coming. The crew turned to the scanners. The void was empty. No ships, no signals, only silence. But the Exilari had learned to fear the silence. One by one, the lights on their ships flickered off. Engines died. Weapons refused to fire. Panic spread. And then the humans spoke. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the Exilari ships. "You took our world." A second voice followed. "You burned our people." A third, whispering. "Now there is nothing left for you." The last Exilari screamed in terror. Then the human warships revealed themselves. Sleek, black, merciless. The final massacre had begun. Supreme Commander Vorketh knew there was no escape. He sank to his knees. His people had once commanded the galaxy. Now, they were nothing. He whispered the last words of his dying race. "Please, mercy." But the humans had none to give. A single order was given. End them. The human fleet opened fire, and the last of the Exilari burned to dust. The war was over. The Exilari Empire, once the greatest power in the galaxy, was gone. No fleets, no armies, no survivors. Only ashes remained. On the bridge of the human flagship Retribution, Grand Admiral Kale stood in silence. The war had taken everything from humanity. Their home, their past, their future. But now, at last, it was finished. A young officer approached. "Sir, we've confirmed it. There are no more Exilari." Kale nodded slowly. He had expected to feel joy, satisfaction, revenge. But there was only emptiness. The enemy was gone, but Earth was still dust. His people had won the war, but they had lost their home. Humanity drifted in the dark, their fleets the last remnants of a species with nowhere to return to. They had no planet, no cities, only warships and cold steel. They were now the ghosts of the void, a fleet without a home, a species without a future. The comms officer hesitated. "Sir, what now?" Kale looked out at the endless stars. For the first time, there was no enemy left to fight, no empire left to destroy, only the vast, empty galaxy. He took a deep breath. Now, he turned to his crew. "Now we find a new home." And with that, the last fleet of humanity vanished into the stars. The war was over, but their story was just beginning.